Y'all are so nice. Thank you. So tonight, I entitled this parable message as History Belongs to the Prayer Interventionist. And I'll say that I want to highlight 3 people. So, Jenna, will you stand up? Have you been a prayer interventionist? Has God come through so powerfully? Yeah. And Billy Bogart. Have you been a prayer interventionist? So, Jenna has a loved one that she's been praying for. And that person came to know Jesus a month or 2 ago. How many years have you been praying? Okay. And Billy was in bed 2 years ago with stage 4 cancer. And are you cancer-free? Well, here you are. Yeah. So I'm going to move on after those, but that is the power of staying with prayer. That's just wonderful. So good. Oh, I know who it was. It was Karen. Karen. Batids? Yeah. So Karen, you've been praying for a loved one for how many years? And that one is... Yeah. Yeah. So these are the ones I wanted to highlight because I was thinking you have changed history. You 3 ladies. And probably so many more of you. So prayer belongs to us. And history belongs to us. They're joined together. History and prayer are joined together. So there was a lawyer in the early 1800s who was also a choir director at a Presbyterian church, and he told his pastor, "I will never be a Christian." And you're probably thinking, now why would you hire a non-Christian choir director? Well, remember in the 1800s, the church was like a social club, kind of like a, connect place. So he told his pastor, "I will never be a Christian." And he went to prayer meetings, and he heard all these people talking about prayer, saw them pray, and he told his pastor, "I never or rarely see any of those prayers answered. I do not want to be a part of this organization," in the sense of calling myself a member. So this lawyer every Monday would have a time conference with his pastor, and he would tell this pastor how poor of a job he preached last Sunday. And he was criticizing and like, "Oh, I can't believe you said that." And this pastor thought, this lawyer has such a hard heart. He probably won't be a Christian. So this pastor is going along this way. And there were some law books that he was supposed to read. And the law books were called the Blackstone Law. And they came from England, and they were laced with the Bible. So he thought, well, why is the Bible in this? It was all about law. And he thought, maybe I should get a Bible and study the original sources of what I'm reading. So he dutifully got a Bible, not because he wanted to. And he started reading it, and he started reading it and reading it. And he began to be troubled by his sinful nature as he read this good book. And then he grew so concerned about his soul that he told this God that he didn't know. He said, you and I are going to have sort of a powwow, and if you show me you're real, I will preach for you. So he went out to the woods, and he spent time all day. And when he was in the woods, he had his Bible out. He would hear some crackling in the woods, like maybe leaves. And he thought, someone's in the woods. And he would hide his Bible. Like, I don't want anybody to see that I'm reading the Bible. And I don't want anybody to see that maybe I'm even like kind of trying to commune with God. And he did that several times. And by the end of the day, he said, I have so much pride. That's what he came to. I have so much pride. I can't let anybody see that I would need help from God, possibly. So he kind of called it a day, and he went back to his house. And the only thing he figured out was he was a prideful man. So he walked into his house. It was dark, but there was a glow in it. And he looked around, and he was, wow. And he felt like there was a presence in his house. And he was arrested. Like, what's going to happen now? And as he was just kind of pondering what was happening, he said waves and waves of liquid love fell upon him. And Charles Finney, the lawyer, left his law practice and said, I will preach for the giver of the liquid love. And this is what he said about his experience. It seemed to me to come in waves and waves of liquid love, for I could not express it any other way. It seemed like the very breath of God. I can recollect distinctly that it seemed to fan me like immense wings. So he became the leader of the Second Great Awakening, is what happened. And there was a missionary and a pastor named Father Nash. And he was a lackluster Christian leader in his church. He took a church at 40 years old, and by the time, like 6 years into it, his church said, we don't want you anymore. You're out of here. So he left. He had to leave. And then can I get some water? And then thank you. Appreciate it. Just when you don't need be thirsty, right? So he had this thing that happened to his eyes. They were inflamed. And he had to go into a dark room. He couldn't see anything. And he was sitting in this dark room because if the lights turned on, it was so painful. He couldn't read. He couldn't do anything. But God came in his darkness. He called it the double veil darkness. In his heart, in his eyes. And in about 3 weeks, he decided, I'm going to give my life to prayer. So this man, Father Nash, found out about what Charles Finney was doing, and he said, I'm going to be his prayer warrior. So what he did was, and what they both did together, they would feel like God was highlighting a city. Father Nash would go ahead of him about 3 or 4 weeks before, and he would rent some horrible little place to stay because he wasn't really going for comfort. He was going to wrestle with the powers of darkness. And he would sometimes end up in a dark cellar because that was all there was, and it was 25 cents a night. So he would be in there, and he would try sometimes to get people in the town that also had a prayer burden. And so he would get on his face and groan. He would be in prayer so long that his nose would bleed. On one occasion, the men that he was with, he and two others, had been praying for 3 days. This is from an account of somebody. Not having stopped to eat. The lady who ran the room and board went to the room to see if the men were okay. On cracking the door open, all she could hear was groaning coming from the floor. When Finney arrived at the location, the lady told him what she had heard in the room. Charles Finney told her not to bother them because they were getting a hold of heaven. It's good, huh? So during this revival, some hard things happened. One of the things that happened was some of the church people didn't like what was happening, if you can believe that. And so they made a statue of Finney and Father Nash, and they burned the effigies, and they hung them. And they were like, these guys. Ugh. And Father Nash said, men do not like the truth at times. So many souls were saved in these cities. In Rochester, there was 100,000 people saved at revivals. And Finney would have said revivals are when there's a new beginning to obey the Word of God. The Word and the Word, right here. So there was a lot of souls saved. There were a few backslidden people after that. Like they stayed in their faith. Crime decreased in cities, and prosperity would follow. So, heaven came down, didn't it? When I was starting this preparation for this message, I was not going to speak the way I'm going to speak. But God has a way of messing up your message so that he can get a message out. So he told me two statements to consider. And it's, if you like your world, don't change your prayer life. That's what he said. If you don't like your world, change your prayer life. I'm going to put that with you today. If you like your world, don't change your prayer life. If you don't like your world, change your prayer life. History belongs to the prayer interventionists. So, do our prayers match the history that we live in? So, when I think about my life, I think about I have many blessings. But I also have loved ones who are racing toward a Christless eternity. I also live in a world that has 64 million innocent lives taken in abortion. I also have, I live in a country where nearly 100,000 people have died of fentanyl overdoses. I live in a world where sex trafficking is becoming a huge money-making industry. And there are people who would totally ruin lives for a few minutes of sexual pleasure. I live in that world. So, What's my answer? What's your answer? So I'm going to read parable of the persistent widow. Then he spoke a parable to them that men always ought to pray and not lose heart, saying there was in a city a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, "Get justice for me from my adversary." And he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, "Though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me." Then the Lord said, "Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God not avenge his own elect, who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth?" So what is the purpose of this parable? Well, I think it expresses God's love for us, doesn't it? Doesn't it say he doesn't want you to grow weary? Doesn't it say he doesn't want you to be faint and give up? And what's the antidote? It's prayer. And what is prayer? Let's look at that. So in the Greek, the original language, it's proseuchesthai. Proseuchesthai. That's pretty good, huh? And what that means is to interact with the Lord by switching human wishes and ideas for his wishes and ideas as he imparts faith. Yeah? That sounds to me like a partnership. And he's the senior partner and I'm the junior partner. Right? And I get to, when I have issues, when I have problems, if I come to him truly, I get to hear what he's saying to me. And he's going to have different thoughts in different ways than I have. You remember a verse like that? "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways." Well, when we have troubles, we get to go have time with the senior partner. So, God does not want us to be weary. He does not want us to faint. He wants us to learn how to pray. He wants us to learn how to pray. That means, do you remember the disciples? They only had one thing they wanted to know from Jesus. That one thing they asked him to teach them. And it was not how to be a great leader, but how to pray. That's what they asked him. And it's in Luke 11. And so we learn how to pray. And I hope that what I learn next year about prayer is so much more than I have learned this year. So let's talk about this parable a little more deeply. We have two characters in this parable that Jesus is telling us about. It's the nature of the judge. The judge represents, in this parable, himself. He does not represent God. He does not represent Satan. But he is a bad leader by every stretch of the imagination. He's not a good leader. He's not a good shepherd. He doesn't care about God or man. So this widow, she is the helpless of all individuals, especially in this Hebrew culture. She doesn't have a defender. She doesn't have a protector. You know, I'm going to entitle her a kind of a black sheep of the society. Now, look at that. That word, black sheep, is interesting. It came from the 1600s, and it was when sometimes a sheep flock would have a black lamb. And it wasn't that the lamb wasn't worth anything, but it was the fur. They wanted to dye fur. Is that right? No. Wool. What? I don't know. Whatever it is. I don't know. Yes, I need to learn some farming. But it was that there couldn't be a color. So it just had limited use. So this widow was kind of like, you don't matter. That's how widows were viewed. And some of you are widows. And I love how you are standing, a lot of you. And I love how people are gathering with widows. You have a special place in God's heart. But anyway, this widow was in trouble. She had a problem. And nobody cared about what it was. Nobody cared. So let's just put ourselves in the place of the widow. We are the people who need help, don't we? And we need protection. We need defense. We need things to change for ourselves. So let me ask you this. Is our misery sometimes our friend in disguise? Because it brings us to the partnership much more quickly. I want to look at a couple verses for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Do we like to go to God when everything's hunky-dory? Do we tend to do that? Don't we want to go to Starbucks and stuff like that? Don't we want to go get a cute outfit at Francesca's? I don't know. So, water again. We tend to not want to seek God when everything's a little bit more simple and easy. And I think those are nice times, so don't get me wrong. But I think we grow the most when times are hard. We grow the most when we're feeling under pressure. And we need help. And we look to God, and He answers us. So let me just say this too, that at the end of our lives, we will be with the Father. And in Revelation 5:8, it says that when we are with the risen Jesus at the marriage feast of the Lamb, it says, now when He had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each having a harp, golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. Father Nash has a lot of prayers in that bowl. How many do I have? How many do you have? Are your troubles going to bring you greater joy because you prayed more on that day? Will you have more partnership contracts? That's what I like to call prayer, partnership contracts. Will you have more partnership contracts in that bowl on the day? I think yes. So it's hard to embrace affliction, but I think those give us a little bit of a boost, don't they? So the judge said that persistence was the only thing that made him decide to give her justice. All right, let's see what it says. It says that the widow would bother him. It said, troubles me. She said, he troubles me. That means bother up close and personal. Can you imagine being a judge and someone's right in your face? A lot. That's what God wants. He wants you to be up close and personal. He loves your face. He wants to show you His face. He made your face. He wants this partnership to be regular and up close and personal. And this lady is not eloquent. Oh, aren't you glad we don't have to be eloquent in prayer? Oh, I love that. I have temples in a lot of interesting places. One is my car. And I yell. And if nobody's home, and even if they are home, sometimes I yell at my house. Because it says that we're supposed to cry out. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But what does persistence look like in our daily lives? Let me tell you that I am someone who wants to grow in prayer, and I have grown, and I want to ask you to be that kind of a person with me. Now, have I arrived? No. Because God was saying you need to change your prayer life, so you already know. I have not arrived, but I actually was super excited. I was like, really? We get to have more time together? I love that. Yes, I say yes. So let me tell you what I do for my time. So I have a couple prayer chairs around my house. I have some little reminders of things I'm praying for, little sheep. I pray for some of the lost lambs, and I can see them from my prayer chair. I have a journal. I have I'll do different stuff. I have a prayer shawl. I'm not going to put it on my cute hair right now. But so the prayer shawl, is that God looks down and says, oh my gosh, she has a prayer shawl, I have to answer her prayers? No, it's for me. It's like, I'm praying now. It's a way to shut out distraction. It's a good thing. I like my prayer shawl. I've got a journal. I write stuff in here, and of course I have the Bible. And I do prayer walks. I have little ways that I do a prayer walk. And I'll take oil sometimes. There's a lot of oily spots. And I also take communion at my house. You can do that. Pastor Steve says yes. You can just tell the Lord, thank you for that you gave your body for my sin. You gave your soul so that my soul could be saved. And then when we take the cup, we are reminded that his precious blood is my righteousness. So we keep asking and seeking and knocking, and we're connecting with God. We're connecting with the God of the impossible when we do that. You know, this Luke 11, 9 through 10, it says, so I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. In the original language, it means keep asking. And then it means keep seeking, keep knocking. John Calvin said, sometimes we need to say a supplication 100 or 1,000 times. So, Charles Spurgeon said, sometimes we need to shake the tree a lot before the fruit falls. And we're being changed. So the blessing of a continual need to get an answer to prayer is we're getting changed. God is showing up, even though the answer may not be totally resolved, but we are getting wisdom. We're getting his ideas. So, sign up for change. Don't be the same person that you are when you sign up to make contracts with God, because prayer is doing business with God. And it's important business because we get to do what he's doing. But if we're too busy, we're not going to be part of that. Don't be too busy. Do not be too busy. I want to share with you about the power of crying out. This was a personal story, and I have learned over the years, I'm surprised at how much I forget in my learning. How about you? But I have learned that when I have a problem, just to go to the Lord. Usually a problem has to do with people, right? Somehow, some way. And people can wear us out. You know, this lady, this widow, is a black sheep, we said. Black sheep only come about because of bad leaders, bad shepherds. That's how black sheep get, they feel unimportant. Guess what? I've been both of those. I've been the bad leader who maybe makes people feel like a black sheep, and I've been the black sheep. But there was a lamb that died for all of that in my life. And probably you could say that too. There are seasons that, I should have been a better leader. I should have been a better at this or that. But there's a lamb that took all that upon himself. So the power of crying out is a shout, a cry aloud, urgent, distress call. I was at forgive me if you've heard this story, but it's one of my favorites, and it fits because God told me, all this fits. And so I was with a group of people, and there were some hard things happening. I'm going to be super vague because it doesn't matter who they were. But, I felt like there were glances made that were like pointing at me. Not pointing, but like there were discussions on the side. There were some hard things that happened in this context. There was actually a very rude statement made. And I said to the Lord, I feel like such a black sheep in this context. Do you know, sometimes we feel totally accepted in some groups, and sometimes we feel like black sheep, right? So I said, I feel like a black sheep. So I thought, all right, time out. I'm going to go talk to my shepherd about my black sheepness. So I take my stuff, take my Bible, take this book that I'd been reading, and I always bring a few books, but I'm like, I'm going to bring this one to my little powwow with my good shepherd. And I went out. I was near an ocean, and I was the only one out there, and I started walking the area, just long expanses. It was only me. I'm like, this is so cool. And I started to declare loudly the glory of God. And then I started to just share and pour out my heart in what was happening. And I felt just so, I don't know how to describe it. Just like, this is all I can do. I can't go on feeling like this black sheep. So I walk over to my towel. I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to study. And I turn to where I was in this book. And this is what it said. Were you the black sheep in your family? God likes sheep. Has your family told you that you are a nobody? Have you been put off and put out and told so many times that you will amount to nothing that you have begun to believe it? Do you feel like the black sheep? And then it said, you are probably the one God is waiting for. And I was like, you are too big. You are so big. Can you imagine? I choose this book on a day that I feel like the black sheep. This is Miles Monroe. He wrote it 10 years before. And on the page that I am reading, Never read this book before. When I read it, he's talking about how I'm feeling. I'm like, you are so big. I don't care who's calling me what. I don't care who's saying what about me. God thinks I'm so cool. So I'm sitting there and I'm totally happy. And then I see this girl walking along the shore. And the Lord said, go help that sheep. I see her walking. And she's walking in the path that I had already walked in. And I knew what I was supposed to say to that person. So I walked up to her. You think I wasn't going to do that after God did that for me? No, I was. So I went up there and I said, hi. I said, I was just sitting over there and I felt like the Lord had a message for you. I said, do you want to hear that? Do you want to hear it? And she said, yeah. And I found out her name was Avery. Found out she went to Georgia Tech. So I said, you know, God thinks you are beautiful inside and out. And I said, but he is tired of you feeling so tired. And he wants you to connect with him because he has such a great plan for you. And she was like, oh. And I said, does that make any sense to you? She goes, oh, yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I go, okay. So I go back to my towel. And she turns around and walks the other way. I'm like, what was that about? Well, I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I see Avery coming toward me. And she said, when she got to my towel, she had to walk a long way because she walked away, and then she came again, and she said, I feel like no, she didn't say God. I feel like I'm supposed to come and tell you all my problems. And I was like, all of them? I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. I'm like, okay. I said, well, why don't you sit down in my office towel? Anyway, this was one of the most interesting things that has ever happened to me. And it comes because of prayer. She said, I have a girlfriend, and I'm committed to that girlfriend, but I like this other girl. And I feel like I don't have integrity. I don't know what to do about that. She said, I'm a practicing Buddhist. I was like, okay. And she said, my family is all messed up, totally messed up. And she said, but I have this praying grandma. She always prays for me, but she's really sick with COVID. I said, okay. I was like, wonderful counselor, can you download something here? This is a lot, but I felt like this was the time of the Lord. This was his way. When we enter into times of prayer, amazing things happen. So I said to Avery, I was like, I did dust off my Buddhist knowledge because I lived in Japan. I was like, yeah. I said, Avery, isn't Buddhism 8 tenets? She said, yep. I said, you know, your life and your problems are so complex and they're so important to figure out. 8 tenets will not lead you. But there is a God who wants to lead you. And he can do it. It's a person. You don't need tenets. You need a capital P person. And I said to her, would you read some parts of the Bible with me? And she and I read John 14, 15, and 16, sitting there. And it's about the Holy Spirit. And I said, this is who can lead and guide you. This is him. She was like, okay. And I said to her, just some things were coming to me. I said, do you know why we're sitting here on this towel talking about what we're talking about? She said, because your grandma is praying. Your grandma is always praying for you. And I said to her, Avery, who do you want to be like? Your family that's a mess? Or do you want to be like your grandma? And she said, I want to be like my grandma. I said, okay. Then let's pray together. And we did. And I still pray for her. I didn't get her phone number. I didn't feel like I was supposed to. But I wonder what God has done in her life. She's got her grandma, and she's got me praying for her. And so, the black sheep. The black sheep. Some of you, I felt like the Holy Spirit said, some of you, because of maybe circumstances or people around you or situations that have been really tough, feel like the black sheep. And I do sometimes. I have that. We need to go to the Good Shepherd. He wants to speak into that. We don't go to people. Let me tell you what black sheep do. They actually can say, I'm a black sheep, and they can go lay in a ditch. Or they can hustle and prove, no, I'm not a black sheep. No, I'm not a black sheep. And both of those are wrong. We go to the Good Shepherd, and he wants to speak. And I want to ask you today, and I want to ask you right now, if you would be brave enough to say, I'm feeling like a black sheep. Would anybody have courage to just get up and stand up? Those without courage, would you stand up? Let's gather around these people. The God of liquid love wants to come down right now. Wants to come down right now and touch you. And wants to speak to you. So let's gather around somebody who needs the Good Shepherd. We're going to support you. We're going to ask for that download of who God is in your life. It may not happen tonight. Charles Finney didn't have it happen right away. But you stood up because you said, I need God and I need help. And he loves that. He loves that. So I'm going to let y'all pray. Some of you are going to have prophetic words. Some of you are going to have just a hug. Some of you are going to have something really powerful to do or to share with the person you're surrounding.